The human girl named Lena stood quietly on the observation deck of Station Greyline. The wide window curved above her, showing a slow river of stars sliding past in the dark. The light from distant suns reflected faintly on the glass and on her face, but she did not move. Her hands rested at her sides. Her breathing was slow and steady. Around her, the station never truly slept. Soft lights hummed in the ceiling. Panels blinked in calm patterns. The floor vibrated just enough to remind everyone that Greyline was always moving, always balancing itself against the pull of space. To most of the crew, this place was loud even when it was quiet. To Lena, it felt peaceful. She was small compared to almost everyone else on the deck. Some crew members walked on long, jointed legs. Others floated slightly above the floor with the help of gravity belts. A few had wide shoulders or thick armor-like skin. Lena wore a simple station uniform that looked almost too thin for someone from a death world. Still, she stood straight as if nothing here could push her aside. Most of the crew barely noticed her. Those who did gave her quick glances and then looked away. They called her the quiet Deathworlder, usually in low voices. Not because they feared her, but because they did not understand her. Humans had joined the wider galaxy only a short time ago. Stories about them traveled faster than facts. Worlds with heavy gravity. Storms that could tear cities apart. Creatures that hunted for sport. And humans had lived through all of it. Lena did not match the stories. She did not talk much. She did not show anger or pride. She did her work, followed orders, and watched. Always watched. A tall crew member passed behind her, speaking sharply into a wrist device. Another group gathered near the center of the deck, their voices tense. Words like fleet, vector, and border floated through the air. Lena listened without turning her head. Beyond the glass, a faint pattern of blinking lights appeared and vanished. Long-range sensors painted shapes that were not yet visible to the eye. Somewhere deep in the station, alarms whispered. They were not loud enough to demand attention, but they were not silent either. They were careful alarms meant to warn without causing fear. Lena knew what they meant. The hostile fleet was still far away, but it was moving with purpose. Its path was clean and direct. No wandering. No delays. The kind of movement that came from confidence. She shifted her weight slightly and leaned closer to the glass. The stars did not change, but her focus did. She remembered lessons she had learned long before she came to Greyline. Lessons about patience, about waiting. On her homeworld, rushing often meant death. Storms did not care how fast you ran. Predators did not care how loud you shouted. You survived by noticing small changes and acting at the right moment. A pair of officers entered the observation deck. One of them spoke loudly, clearly frustrated. The other tried to calm him using slow, careful words. Lena caught pieces of their talk. They were not sure if Greyline could hold its position if the fleet came closer. They were not sure if backup would arrive in time. They were not sure how humans would react if things went wrong. One of them glanced at Lena. His eyes lingered for half a second, then moved on. To him, she was just another human specialist, assigned to the station as part of some agreement. Quiet. Young. Easy to overlook. Lena did not look back. She did not need to. She could feel the tension in the room the way she could feel changes in air pressure before a storm. Fear had a shape. It had weight. It pressed on people and made them louder, sharper, less careful. She had learned early in life that fear could be useful if you let it speak, but dangerous if you let it lead. The lights dimmed slightly as the station adjusted power. A soft tone echoed, signaling a shift to alert status. Still no shouting. No running. Greyline was a research and supply station, not a warship. Its strength was in balance and planning, not weapons. Lena liked that. She remembered her first day on the station. How the air had felt thinner, lighter. How the gravity had made her steps feel strange. How some crew members had watched her closely, expecting something wild or reckless. She had done nothing to meet those expectations. She had simply learned the layout, memorized routines, and listened. Listening was something humans were good at, even when others forgot that. A small maintenance drone floated past, its lights blinking green. Lena followed it with her eyes. She knew its route. She knew when it would turn, when it would stop, when it would return to its dock. Many systems on Greyline ran on patterns. Patterns were comforting. Patterns could be changed. The whispering alarms grew slightly stronger. Still gentle. Still controlled. Somewhere, a central system was comparing probabilities and updating outcomes. Lena trusted numbers, but she trusted people less. Numbers could not panic. People could. A group of younger crew members gathered near the far window, staring out with wide eyes. One of them laughed nervously and said something about humans enjoying danger. Another replied that humans must be broken to think like that. Lena's lips pressed together, not in anger but in thought. Humans did not enjoy danger. They understood it. She placed her palm lightly against the glass. It was cool and smooth. The stars beyond it were deadly but beautiful. On her homeworld, beauty often came with risk. Bright colors warned of poison. Calm skies hid violent winds. You learn not to trust appearances alone. The hostile fleet was still unseen, but its presence already shaped the station. Conversations shortened. Movements became faster. Mistakes began to appear. A drop tool. A wrong code entered and quickly corrected. Small things, but Lena noticed them all. She stepped away from the window and moved toward a quiet corner of the deck. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. That was fine. She preferred it that way. From this spot, she could see reflections in the glass. Crew members moving behind her. Lights changing. Information scrolling across distant panels. She did not read them directly, but she knew what they showed. She had studied the station systems carefully, not because she wanted control, but because understanding meant safety. A message alert blinked on a nearby console. It was not meant for her, but she could see the color shift that marked priority traffic. The fleet had changed speed. Slightly faster now. A test, perhaps. A question asked without words. Lena answered the question in her own mind. She stayed where she was as the deck grew more crowded. Officers came and went. Orders were given, revised, and given again. The station prepared, slowly and carefully, like a person holding their breath. Through it all, Lena remained calm. She thought about her parents, far away on a heavy world with strong winds and long nights. She thought about the stories they used to tell her, about surviving winters and learning when to speak and when to stay silent. Silence, they said, was not emptiness. It was space. Space to think. Space to choose. The whispering alarms reached a steady rhythm. The hostile fleet was close enough now that no one doubted its intent. Still, there was no attack. Just pressure. Just waiting. Lena lifted her head and looked once more at the stars. The command room was never quiet, but now it felt crowded with sound. Voices overlapped, rose and fell again. Words flew across the room like sparks. Orders, fears, guesses, and warnings mixed together until it was hard to tell one from another. Screens along the walls showed maps, numbers, and moving shapes that marked the slow approach of the hostile fleet. Lena sat in a chair near the back of the room. She was far from the main table and even farther from the center of attention. No one had asked her to speak, and she had not offered. Her hands rested on her knees. Her face was calm. Her eyes moved from screen to screen, from person to person. At the table, Tom leaned forward, his hands flat on the smooth surface. His voice was loud, sharp with stress. He spoke about defense lines and power limits. He pointed at a glowing map and said the station could not hold if the fleet decided to push forward. His words came fast, as if speed could make them stronger. Sarah shook her head and replied just as quickly. She argued for evacuation routes and safe zones. She spoke about lives, about risk, about the station not being worth a full loss. Her voice did not shake, but her fingers tapped against the table again and again. Evan stood near one of the screens, reading data as it changed. He tried to speak calmly, but his words were often cut off. He talked about timing and delay. He said the fleet was waiting for something, though he did not know what. He asked for patience. Patience was in short supply. The room was filled with people from many worlds. Some breathed fast. Some shifted their weight or adjusted their gear again and again. A few spoke in low voices to each other, their eyes full of worry. Fear moved through the room like a quiet wave, touching everyone in its path. Everyone except Lena. She watched it all with careful focus. She did not judge. She did not react. She simply noticed. Tom's anger. Sarah's fear for others. Evan's need for order. The way voices grew louder when answers were missing. The way silence made people uncomfortable. She memorized the layout of the room even though she already knew it. The doors. The consoles. The blind spots in the camera views. She noted which screens showed raw data and which showed filtered results. She noticed a delay in one feed, just a fraction of a second, but enough to matter. No one noticed her noticing. A sharp tone sounded, and a new message appeared on the main screen. The hostile fleet had adjusted its formation. Not a full change. Just enough to be seen. Enough to be felt. The room grew louder. Tom slammed his hand on the table and demanded a decision. Sarah raised her voice for the first time, insisting that waiting would cost lives. Evan asked for one more minute to confirm readings. Several others joined in, each adding their own view, their own fear. Lena lowered her gaze slightly, not in shame but in thought. She remembered training sessions from long ago. Not official ones but lessons learned through experience. When too many voices spoke at once, important things were missed. When fear took control, mistakes followed. On her world, panic could mean stepping into the wrong place at the wrong time. Could mean death. Here, panic could mean something worse. The meeting dragged on. Decisions were suggested, then pulled back. Plans were half-built and then torn apart. The hostile fleet did nothing. It waited. Lena's eyes flicked to a small side console near her chair. It was not part of the main system, just a local access point for environmental data. She had used it before only to check readings and learn routines. She knew its limits. She also knew what it connected to. No one was watching her. She shifted in her chair, slow and natural, and leaned slightly closer to the console. Her fingers hovered near the surface but did not touch it yet. She listened as Tom spoke again, repeating himself, his voice rough now. She listened as Sarah argued back, her words tight with urgency. The room felt smaller. Lena touched the console. The screen lit up softly, its glow faint compared to the main displays. She moved through menus with quick, careful motions. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Just observation. She checked environmental systems, internal power flow, and external sensor overlap. She looked for gaps, for places where data met but did not quite match. She found several. Her breathing stayed even as she worked. She did not rush. Rushing led to errors. Errors led to attention. She did not want attention. Across the room, Evan paused mid-sentence and frowned at his screen. He adjusted a setting and leaned closer. "That's odd," he said quietly, though no one heard him. Lena adjusted one value then another. She did not change outcomes. She changed perspectives. The station systems were designed by many species, each with different assumptions. Humans were good at finding the spaces between assumptions. She pulled up a simulation, low-level and local. It showed how the station would appear to outside sensors under different conditions. She compared it to known data about the hostile fleet. Their technology. Their caution. Their fear of unstable environments. A shape began to form in her mind. Not a plan yet. Just a direction. The voices in the room grew sharp again. Someone mentioned the word, surrender, and the reaction was instant. Shouts. Anger. Fear. Lena's fingers paused for a moment. She did not believe in surrender, but not for the reasons others thought. On her world, survival was not about pride. It was about choice. And sometimes the best choice was to make the danger choose to leave. She continued working. She adjusted how certain readings were shared between systems. Nothing false. Nothing that could be called a lie. Just emphasis. Just timing. Just letting some signals speak louder than others. The hostile fleet was still waiting, watching. Lena imagined their commanders studying their own screens, seeing patterns shift. Seeing a station that did not behave as expected. A station that did not panic but did not relax either. She glanced up briefly. No one was looking at her. Tom and Sarah were locked in another argument. Evan was deep in data again, his earlier concern forgotten in the flood of new information. Good. Lena saved her changes under a routine maintenance tag. Boring. Easy to miss. She leaned back in her chair and folded her hands again, her face calm and unreadable. Inside, her mind moved quickly. This was only the beginning. She had not solved anything yet. She had only opened a door. Beyond it was risk, and beyond that, possibility. The meeting continued, loud and tense. Decisions would be made soon, driven by fear and urgency. Lena knew that. But she also knew something else. Even the loudest voices could be guided without being silenced. She watched the screens as new data came in. Slight changes. Small delays. Confusion that did not yet have a name. The hostile fleet remained where it was. For the first time since the meeting began, Lena allowed herself a single quiet thought of certainty. She did not need to speak. She had already begun. Lena moved through the station as if she belonged to the walls and floors, as if Greyline itself had learned her shape and made space for her. She did not hurry. People who hurried were noticed. People who moved with purpose but without rush were ignored. The command meeting was still going on when she stepped out into the corridor. Voices followed her through the open door, loud and tight with stress. She did not look back. She already knew what they would decide in the next few minutes. More waiting. More arguing. No clear action. That was fine. She did not need permission. The corridor lights were steady, casting long, soft shadows. Lena walked past maintenance panels, storage bays, and silent terminals. Every sound mattered to her. The hum of power lines. The faint click of cooling systems. The station was speaking all the time. Most people did not listen. She stopped at a side console near an access junction. It was a low-level station terminal, meant for technicians checking daily systems. Nothing important. Nothing dangerous. She placed her hand on the surface and the screen came alive. Her eyes moved fast, but her hands stayed calm. She checked power flow first. Greyline used layered systems, each one supporting the next. If one failed, another would take its place. That made the station safe, but it also made it complex. Complex systems could be shaped. She adjusted a small power output in one outer section. Just a fraction. Not enough to cause alarms. Not enough to affect daily work. But enough to change how the station looked from the outside. Then she moved to signal routing. The station sent out constant information. Navigation pings. Environmental data. Research updates. All harmless. All routine. Lena did not stop them. She shifted their paths, letting some arrive early, others late. She created a rhythm that did not match standard patterns. To Greyline, nothing was wrong. To anyone watching from far away, things would feel off. She moved on before the system could flag her presence. Not because she was afraid, but because she respected the station's balance. She did not want to break it. She wanted to bend it. As she walked, she thought about the hostile fleet. She had studied everything available about them. Their ships were strong, but their crews preferred control. They avoided unknown conditions. They believed survival depended on prediction. Humans had learned something different. She reached another terminal, this one closer to the station's environmental controls. The air temperature inside Greyline stayed within a narrow range, comfortable for most species. Lena did not change the actual temperature. She changed how it was reported. She layered data streams, blending harmless readings with simulated extremes. Not lies but possibilities. High radiation spikes that faded quickly. Gravity fluctuations that appeared and vanished. Signs of internal storms that never reached critical levels. To the station, these were shadows. To the enemy fleet, they would look like warnings. Lena paused for a moment and rested her fingers on the edge of the console. She closed her eyes briefly and pictured her homeworld. Heavy skies. Shifting ground. Winds that screamed without warning. Humans had learned to live with danger as a constant, not an event. She opened her eyes and continued. In the command room, the officers were still arguing. Evan noticed new data on his screen and frowned. "That's not right," he said quietly. He checked another feed. It showed something else also strange. He began to cross-check systems. The more he checked, the more unclear things became. The hostile fleet received the same confusion. Their sensors showed Greyline as unstable. Not failing but changing. Power signatures rose and fell without clear cause. Environmental readings suggested conditions that would tear apart most ships or crews if they came too close. Radiation bursts appeared, then vanished. Gravity readings hinted at sudden spikes. Structural stress markers blinked on and off like warning lights that could not decide whether to stay on. Most troubling of all was how calm the station appeared internally. No mass movement. No evacuation signals. No signs of panic. The fleet slowed. Their commanders watched their screens and spoke in low voices. This was not what a cornered station looked like. This was not fear. This was something else. Back on Greyline, Lena moved deeper into the station. She passed by crew members who rushed toward duty stations, their faces tight with worry. No one stopped her. She looked like she belonged where she was. She accessed a relay node near the outer hull. This one required a higher clearance, but her role gave her limited access. Enough. She worked within her limits, careful not to cross lines that would trigger alerts. She adjusted the station's external profile just enough to exaggerate its natural resilience. Hull strength readings appeared higher than normal. Structural tolerance numbers shifted upward. Not impossible. Just unlikely. Humans were known for unlikely survival. She let that idea speak through the data. The hostile fleet had records. Stories. Reports from other encounters. Humans who survived crashes. Humans who fought on worlds no one else would land on. Humans who adapted to poison air and crushing gravity. Now their sensors told them this station might be one of those places. A place where conditions could turn deadly without warning. A place where the residents might endure while invaders would not. Confusion spread through the fleet. Orders slowed. Questions were asked. Assumptions were challenged. Some commanders suggested waiting for clearer readings. Others warned that waiting too long could make things worse. Greyline did nothing. Lena finished her last adjustment and stepped away from the terminal. She rolled her shoulders once, easing a quiet tension she had not noticed building. Her work was not done, but the foundation was set. She returned to the command level and slipped back into the room without a sound. The meeting was still in chaos, but it had changed. Voices were still loud, but now they carried uncertainty instead of certainty. Tom stared at a screen, his earlier anger replaced by confusion. "These readings don't make sense," he said. "They shouldn't be able to handle this." Sarah's face was pale as she scanned another display. "If those numbers are right," she said slowly, "approaching the station could be dangerous." Evan said nothing. He was quiet now, deep in thought. Lena sat back in her chair, her posture relaxed. She watched the data flow and felt the station breathe around her. Everything was still stable. Everything was still safe. The hostile fleet did not advance. Minutes passed. Then more. Their formation shifted slightly, not forward, but sideways. A small retreat, careful and measured. Lena allowed herself a slow breath. She had not fired a weapon. She had not spoken a word. She had simply let the truth of humanity's endurance shape the enemy's fear. Greyline remained where it was, calm and whole. And far away, a powerful force hesitated, unsure of what it was facing. For now that was enough. The hostile force paused. At first, no one on Station Greyline believed it. The enemy ships had slowed before, but this was different. Their movement stopped completely. They did not advance. They did not spread out. They simply held their position in the dark, far beyond the main windows, like shapes frozen in thought. In the command room the noise faded little by little. Voices dropped from shouting to sharp whispers. People leaned closer to their screens, checking the same numbers again and again, hoping the pause was real. Evan was the first to say it out loud. "They've stopped," he said, his voice low and careful, as if loud words might break the moment. Tom looked up from his console. His face was tight, but his eyes were focused now, no longer angry. "For how long?" he asked. "I don't know," Evan replied. "But they're not moving." Sarah folded her arms and stared at the main display. Her fingers had stopped tapping. "That doesn't make sense," she said. They had the advantage. Around them, other officers exchanged uneasy looks. Some felt relief. Others felt fear. A pause could mean retreat, or it could mean something worse. Lena sat quietly in her chair near the back of the room. She did not look surprised. She watched the data flow with calm attention, noting small changes in signal strength and formation spacing. The enemy fleet was not preparing to strike. Their patterns showed caution, not aggression. Minutes passed. The station remained on alert, but nothing happened. No warning tones. No sudden changes. Greyline stayed steady, like a deep breath held without strain. Then the first sign appeared. One of the hostile ships shifted its course. Not toward the station but away from it. Slowly. Carefully. As if testing the idea. Evan's eyes widened slightly. "They're turning," he said. The room went silent. Another ship followed. Then another. Their formation loosened, no longer aimed like a blade. It bent, curved, and began to pull back. "They're withdrawing," Sarah said, disbelief clear in her voice. Tom stood very still. "No weapons fired," he said. "No final message. Nothing." The hostile force continued to retreat. Not fast. Not in panic. But with clear intent. They were leaving. On the observation deck, crew members gathered at the windows, watching distant lights fade into the dark. Some laughed softly, unable to stop themselves. Others closed their eyes, letting relief wash over them. A few simply sat down where they stood. Greyline had survived. In the command room, tension drained away, leaving behind exhaustion and confusion. People slumped into chairs or leaned against consoles. Orders were given to lower alert levels, slowly and carefully, as if no one quite trusted the quiet yet. Evan ran one last check of the sensors. "They're gone," he said at last. "They've changed course completely." A soft sound moved through the room. Not cheers. Just breath being released. Only then did the questions begin. Tom turned toward the others, his brow furrowed. "Why?" he asked. "Why pull back now?" Sarah shook her head. "We didn't threaten them. We didn't fire. We didn't even move. They saw something," Evan said slowly. "Something they didn't like." Eyes turned to the screens again. Data scrolled past, showing the same strange readings from before. Environmental warnings that never became disasters. Power levels that rose and fell in odd patterns. Signs of strength mixed with signs of danger. Evan leaned back and rubbed his face. "They thought we were unstable," he said. Too risky. Tom let out a short laugh, half disbelief, half wonder. They thought we were dangerous without lifting a weapon. Sarah's gaze moved across the room, stopping on Lena. Lena met her eyes calmly. Sarah frowned slightly. Lena, she said slowly, what did you do? The room grew quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Curious. Focused. Lena stood from her chair. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. She walked toward the table and stopped at a respectful distance. I adjusted some systems, she said simply. Tom stared at her. Adjusted? He repeated. Yes, Lena said. Power flow. Signal timing. External readings. Evan's eyes widened as understanding began to form. You changed how we look to them, he said. Not what we are. Just what they saw. Lena nodded. Sarah crossed her arms again, but this time her posture was thoughtful, not defensive. You made them think we were unpredictable and dangerous to approach, Evan added. Lena did not smile. Humans live in dangerous places, she said. They know this. The room was silent as the meaning settled in. Tom ran a hand through his hair. You didn't fake anything, he said slowly. You used real data. Yes, Lena replied. I only showed possibilities. Sarah exhaled. You made them question their beliefs. Lena looked down for a moment, then back up. They believe survival depends on control, she said. We survive by adapting. No one argued. As reports came in from other sections of the station, a clear picture formed. Nothing had been damaged. No systems were stressed beyond safe limits. Lena's changes had been careful, balanced, and temporary. She turned our reputation into a shield, Evan said quietly. Word spread quickly through Greyline. Crew members whispered to each other, pointing toward the command room, sharing pieces of the story. The quiet human girl. The silent adjustments. The enemy that left without a fight. Lena returned to her seat as the officers continued to talk, this time in calmer tones. Plans shifted from defense to recovery. Systems were restored to normal patterns. The station settled back into its steady rhythm. From the observation deck, the stars looked the same as before. Cold, bright, endless. But something had changed. Later, as the station returned to routine, Tom stood alone for a moment, looking at the data logs Lena had left behind. They were clean, simple, almost boring. He shook his head in wonder. We almost shouted ourselves into a battle, he murmured. Nearby, Sarah watched Lena walk down the corridor, her steps quiet, her posture relaxed. She never raised her voice, Sarah said. Evan nodded. She didn't need to. Lena moved through Greyline as she always had, unnoticed by most, respected by a few. She passed familiar corridors and softly humming panels. The station felt calm again. She paused by a window and looked out into the dark where the hostile fleet had been. They were gone. She felt no pride, no thrill. Only quiet satisfaction. This was how survival worked. Not through force but through understanding. Behind her, the crew slowly came to the same realization. The enemy had not been defeated by weapons. They had been stopped by a single human, standing still, letting the galaxy remember what humans truly were. And Greyline drifted on, safe and unchanged, carrying a new truth with it into the stars. The station returned to normal slowly as if it did not fully trust the calm. Lights softened back to their usual glow. Corridors lost their sharp edge of urgency. Crew members returned to their duties with quiet voices and tired faces. Greyline drifted through space as it always had, steady and balanced, but everyone aboard knew something had changed. Lena felt it too. She moved through the station in the days after the danger passed, doing her work as she always did. She checked systems, reviewed reports, and listened more than she spoke, which was not at all. Most people did not stop her. Some nodded when they passed her. A few looked at her with new respect, though they did not know what to say. Stories traveled fast on a station like Greyline. The hostile force that had come and left without a fight. The strange readings. The fear that turned into confusion, then retreat. Lena heard pieces of it as she walked by open doors or shared lifts. Her name was spoken quietly, sometimes with wonder, sometimes with disbelief. She did not correct anyone. Captain Reed watched her from a distance for a long time before he spoke to her. He was a calm man used to pressure, but even he had been shaken by how close they had come to disaster. He had read the reports. He had seen the logs. He understood now that what saved Greyline had not been a single command or a strong defense line, but something quieter. Something human. On the third day after the fleet withdrew, Captain Reed asked Lena to meet him in his office. The room was simple. A desk, a few chairs, and a wide window that looked out into space. The stars were distant and still, uncaring of what had almost happened. Reed stood by the window when Lena entered. He turned and nodded to her, offering a seat. She sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not heavy. It was calm, like the pause between breaths. "I've reviewed everything," Reed said at last. His voice was steady but thoughtful. "Your system changes. Your timing. The way the enemy reacted." Lena listened. "You acted alone," he continued. "Without orders. Without telling anyone." "Yes," Lena said. Reed studied her face. She did not avoid his gaze. She did not challenge it either. She simply met it. "Why?" he asked. The question was not angry. It was not accusing. It was honest. Lena took a slow breath. She had not spoken much in days, but words were not difficult for her. They were just tools like any other. "It was necessary," she said. Her voice was calm and certain. Not loud. Not quiet. Just clear. Reed nodded slowly. "Necessary to you," he said. "Or necessary for the station?" Lena thought for a moment. "Both." He leaned back against the desk. "You could have brought your ideas to command," he said. "We might have worked together." "Yes," Lena replied. "But there was no time. And too many voices." Reed did not argue. He remembered the shouting. The confusion. The fear. "You knew they would hesitate," he said. "I knew they would doubt," Lena said. "Doubt slows action." Reed smiled faintly. "You understand people," he said. "I understand fear," Lena replied. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Did you ever think about what would happen if you were wrong?" "Yes." "And?" Lena's shoulders lifted slightly, then settled. "On my world," she said, "waiting can be worse than acting." Reed turned back to the window and looked out at the stars. "Humans," he said softly. "You live with danger like it's weather." Lena did not answer. She did not need to. "You changed how they see us," Reed said after a while. "Not just that fleet. Others will hear about this." "That is acceptable," Lena said. Reed laughed quietly. "That's one way to put it." He straightened and faced her again. "I won't punish you," he said. "What you did saved lives. But I need to understand you." Lena tilted her head slightly. "I am not difficult to understand," she said. Reed raised an eyebrow. "We survive," Lena continued. "We adapt. We let others underestimate us." The captain nodded. "You let them think you were weak." "Yes." "And when it mattered," Reed said, "you acted." "Yes." Another silence followed. This one felt complete, like a story that had reached its end. "You're free to go," Reed said finally. Lena stood. She gave a small nod and turned toward the door. "Lena," Reed said before she reached it. She stopped and looked back. "You did well," he said. She accepted the words with a nod, then left the room. Outside, the corridor was quiet. The station hummed softly around her. Life had returned to its usual rhythm. Lena walked without hurry, her steps light. She passed crew members who paused to watch her go. Some smiled. Some looked away. A few whispered. She did not react. At the observation deck, she stopped and looked out at the stars again. They looked the same as always, but she knew better. Space remembered actions, even quiet ones. So did people. Somewhere far away, the hostile fleet was still traveling, carrying with it a memory of confusion and fear. A memory of a place that did not behave as expected. A place where humans lived. Lena rested her hand against the glass. She had spoken when it was needed. Now once again the Deathworlder girl fell silent. And Greyline drifted on, safe beneath the watchful stars.